All right, hello everybody. We're the Border States Electric Group. We worked on a fleet metric data analysis project. I'm Noah, this is Hunter, this is Elijah, and this is Tim. So just for a small introduction, Hunter and I both worked on the back end team, while Tim and Elijah both worked on the front end team. And our company sponsor is Michael Schnepp. He is the data and analytics manager for Border States. So just kind of a company overview on what Border States does is they work in supply chain solutions. They move products from the manufacturers to the customers, and they work with material management as well as logistics and delivery services. And they also provide technical support and training for their services. So they're headquartered here in Fargo. They just built a new building. It's right on the west side of I-29. So they have more than 100 branches in 22 states. You can see that they've been expanding here to the east. And 2018 fiscal year, they made $2.08 billion in sales. So what does the data and analytics team do at BSE? They design and maintain the data warehouse that stores all their data. They also work with enterprise-wide reporting based on the past year's results. And right now they're working towards advanced analytics, which would be predictive forecasting. So basically, they want to take all these past results and be able to predict what's going to happen within like the next year, or maybe even next 2 years. These tools that are helping them achieve that goal is SAP HANA for the database, and then SAP Build Toolkit, which Tim and Elijah will talk about more in the future.
So I'm going to go over the company's problem that we were kind of set on. So the problem was that the data pulled from these fleet vehicles is not really easy to access. It's not centralized, it's not really automated, and there's very limited visibility. And it's also stored on a third-party website. So this means that the branch leadership has little to no visibility of the data that's actually coming off of the trucks, because the data is basically only accessed when necessary. That and the current dashboards that they had are slow and kind of hard to navigate, so the user interface, user experience, and the speed kind of just needed a little like fresh set of eyes to look at it. So our solution, we spent time on a front-end dashboard for the fleet metrics using SAP Build. So this would allow them to compare, filter, and export the metrics. This dashboard would be connected to an SAP HANA database, which would store the data that is pulled from J.J. Keller and Compass. Along with that solution, we were also tasked with creating standard, repeatable, and automated processes to take the data from J.J. Keller and Compass and put it into the database. And finally, we had to make the integration between pulling the data and putting it into the database. So with our solution, what value do we add for the customer? First off, this will allow for fast and easy reporting. Secondly, it'll make easy comparisons between branches, regions, and areas. It'll also save time for data collection and data sharing, which will ultimately make it easy to share data between the key members of the organization. So the peak idea of this, that we're going to help them make informed business decisions with this tool. Just to go over our schedule for this project. Starting off, the first sprint was mostly setup. So we created a database, we generated all the credentials we needed for the different tools, and then we had our initial requirement meeting with Michael, and then we also did a small sort of tools training. Sprint 2 was mostly the low resolution dashboard prototype. We discovered that J.J. Keller and Compass actually had an API available for us to use to access data, and we worked on modeling the database and pulling data from J.J. Keller and Compass manually. For Sprint 3, we began on the high resolution prototype for the dashboard. We worked on implementing the API that we found out in Sprint 2, and worked on cleaning up the data and compiling it into a way that would be easy to send to Michael. And in Sprint 4, we finished our high-resolution prototype work, or as far as we could go. We documented our API work, and then we organized our data and created the project right-end.
So this was kind of our initial high-end project component overview. So basically, where we start here's at the personal computers, and we're going to send a request to the J.J. Keller API, which will in turn grab the data that we've requested from the database, come back through the API request, and send it back to our computer. So this data is going to be sent to the SAP Build server, as well as the SAP Cloud Platform, which pushes to the database. And then all of these things will push to the dashboard prototypes that these two have created, which will then be available on our personal computers. So just an overview, we have the high-resolution prototype, which is navigable buttons, pages in a standardized layout with templating. They'll go into more detail on that. Hunter and I built an SAP HANA database for storing units and report data for dashboarding. We use JJ Keller and Compass for manually pulling unit metric reports. There's multiple reports that we'll talk about. And using the JJ Keller APIs, which is access to raw engine data, engine events, and unit data. So this is what the table structure for our SAP database looks like. I'm guessing everyone here has seen a UML table diagram, so I'm not going to go into specifics. But everything kind of starts from right here at the units, and units are the trucks and vehicles that they're driving. So Ford something or Chevy, some kind of truck, and that hooks up to unit activity, which is report metrics. That report is called unit activity. And this is another report called vehicle unit performance. So that's going to store all those specific report dates there. And then we have branches, which is all the different branches through border states. So the project status for backend, we worked with the JJ Keller API. There are 15 different free APIs that were offered to us. We mainly only use 2. So the biggest one is token and account credentials. So we pass with a post request our credentials and then send us back a token that lets us, we're available to access the data that we're asking for. It's going to return some JSON or some XML data of units, just some test JSON. So like I said, the main API we're using is unit engine data, which gives us access to a unit's certain metrics, the driver's metrics, because a unit can be driven by multiple drivers, and trip records for that unit for the time that we've requested. And right now it's running on test data that JJ Keller has provided to us, and eventually it'll be needed to move to production data. So what we're using for this script that's going to talk with the API, I decided to use Python 3. So some of the libraries I'm using are pandas. That's for JSON flattening. A lot of the JSON that comes in is nested, so we want to flatten that so it's easier to deal with. The CSV library, so we can export this data to a CSV in kind of an easier way to look at it rather than just through a console. And then using request library for the get and post requests that we're going to post to the API. So just kind of a basic overview of how the script goes is we're going to create a token, and then we use bearer authorization with that token for every GET request after that. And we're going to pull the CG root, which is basically an ID for the overall company. It's called the CG root ID. And then we can pull the company list, which provides all the locations that are underneath the CG root ID. And then you're able to pull unit engine data with those IDs. And then right now we're working with exporting relevant driver data to CSV after you've run the script. And we also used Postman a lot. The person at JJ Keller that gave us the APIs sent us a Postman environment script, so that was super helpful. So basically the database is created with tables and test data. JJ Keller manual report data is pulled for the past 3 years. The database is going to need more tables added and edits depending on which other reports they want to be added. Right now we just have the 3, and more API testing in the future as well, because the API was purely experimental.
So for the project front end, we moved from the low resolution to a high resolution dashboard, which consists of a much more clear and defined templated page system with a much higher amount of interactability and customization. However, we reached a stopping point, unable to proceed with the current tools to link the database from SAP HANA to the actual dashboard. We did create a write-up with these tools for moving forward for BSE. Some of the advantages were the easy templating. It's very easy to get a site that looks complete and looks well put together. as well as easy planned navigation. The system shows you every interaction and every line between pages and between buttons and things like that your site will have. So you can easily see these interactions, and if one is wrong, go in, edit it for the very specific endpoint you want it to land on, things like that. One disadvantage is without what is a Web IDE license, which costs money and takes time to learn, the high end cannot connect to the SAP HANA database. So I'm going to go into a demo now of our high end prototype. So this will be the landing page. This is what a manager would see upon logging in. It gives overall stats for, this is all test data and fake data, but it gives stats for the previous couple of months, and you have the three main metrics below. Each of those, when you click on them, will send you to a more detailed view of that metric, and you can check on overall branch performance, the miles driven, the idle time. They'll all have the same time frame, but the different unit sets for each type of data that it is. You have the ability to change between branches and see these same stats for the different branch, which leads to the comparison page, where you take your branch or two branches and you look at the performance or a single metric and compare them to each other. So you can see the overall performance between the Minnesota and North Dakota branch, but we can also just look at how did the gross profit of these branches compare over this time set, or what was the idling time like on these sets, on the vehicles for these sets. And you can navigate back to the home page and everything is fully functional and set up. It just, without the IDE, we can't connect it to the data pulled from JJ Keller. And now I'll hand it over to Tim, who will be talking about kind of the issues and risks, as well as a postmortem.
We had two main issues throughout this project. So the first thing was we had a delayed access to get to the API. They had a lengthy process where you had to submit to be able to access it, and then eventually they send you the information about how to get into using the API. Then we also were unable to get complete access to the front-end tools. This limited our functionality that we would have liked to implement, but we did the best with what we could. For a postmill, we had to work around the limited front-end tools. Again, it would have been nice to have more complex things we could have done, but overall, the products are well enough for what you want if you want prototypes to rapidly give out ideas of what you have in mind for your front-end dashboards. Communication was good throughout the whole project. Michael was very good about getting us the information when we needed it, and we were able to meet regularly to communicate between front-end and back-end teams. We also feel that exploring the API was a big step forward for us. That helps to create a lot of potential options in the future for automating this whole process, which can be developed in the next steps. For our next steps, we feel it would be good to do full integration between the high-resolution prototype and the database. We want to automate the data transfer process because right now the current outline is you use the API to pull the data and then you would push that off into the HANA database, which would then be connected. It'd be nice to be able to just pull it directly and ship it out into the HANA database without having to do intermediate steps. And then would like to switch the API creds to pull from production data, because right now it's just pulling from test data, as was mentioned earlier. And then the data calculations to convert the raw data into the actual desired outputs to display on the high resolution prototype would still need to be implemented. Are there any questions?
So when this goes to border states, and
Mhm.
you had the issue with the license.
Yep.
Do they have the license and it'll be solved, or is this gonna be an issue for them?
That was something we talked to Michael about when we discovered that it was something we needed. And he had told us that they had been having trouble with it. But it is something that we have written into our recommendation and documentation that they look into as an option.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'd say it's more or less we hit that limitation and we were kind of exploring the tool
Yep.
for them as well. So they know that to move forward with that, they would need to go to that next step. So that's just kind of up to them whether or not they choose to do such a thing.
Is there, what's the option if it turns out they want $1 bazillion for the license?
That's a wonderful question. Michaels?
I can chime in. So the tool we're using is a prototyping tool. It's not our front-end dashboard. So we have tools in place that can connect to HANA data. So we take what they did on the API side, pull it into our HANA, and then use it on a different front end. That's where they ran into some challenges with this front-end tool, which we wanted to explore because we need a way to do faster prototyping, which I think was proven out here.
We have some stuff written up too, as well as like recommendations on what tools might work better as well. That'll be handed off on Friday. So
Any other questions?
The trivia one, you did a compare, but I didn't see how you picked which two to compare.
That was just hard coded in at the moment
Yep.
due to the limitations of the prototyping. There's the way you have to basically set it up is you make a new page that has each individual set of data that you would have to manually set within each page. So in order to develop it faster, we just kept it to a limited set of data for conveying the prototype idea.
Yeah, so as it was sort of we hit this roadblock where we're not going to be able to do what we had originally planned to do on the front end. So instead our focus shifted more into doing back end, and that was just sort of a display of how far we got up to that point. Does that make sense?
And it was fleshing out a prototype and showing how fast you can get a prototype that large and complicated that works, for showing them that they could use that for quick prototyping in the future when they are looking for that utility.
anything else?
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you guys.